If you've got 10 years worth of experience, I would say to a leader, fine. Have you got 10 years worth of experience? Or have you got 1 year's worth of experience that you've repeated 9 times? I think our expectations of leaders today are exceptional. So the 360 nature of a leadership role, being there for people, being there for the commercial bit, being everything all at once. And it's not just the everything all at once-ness of things, it's also the rate and quality for which you need to deploy that as well, which is the pretty frightening thing. AI is here to stay. It is changing the way that we work. It is going to continue changing the way that we work. Use it more, use it often, see what the results are, and then see what it has to say about you and your next steps.
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, So Energy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.
Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Look, I want to take you down memory lane.
Okay.
You started as a music teacher first. So Just talk me through. I'm also interested to see how much being a music teacher has helped you in the world of L&D, but also talk me through that jump from like the world of teaching to L&D.
Nice. All right. Good question. And well researched. Nice one. Music was always a passion for me. And that's how I figured out that I really enjoy helping others. So you get to a certain point in your musical development, and during school and during college, I was helping out others that were coming along. I thought, I really like this. I'm really getting something out of helping others. And so when it came time to pick what you're going to do for the rest of your life, when we're at that age we're going to go to university, I thought, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do music teaching. And that's what I wanted to do. And there's only a few options at the time, really, in terms of where to go for that. I took me to the South Coast in Chichester, and I did their music teaching course. And I suppose the rest of history there, I did a couple of years then as a music teacher. But from a personal I got really into personal development at that stage. I was trying to figure out how I could be the most effective communicator that I could be, how I could be the most effective teacher that I could be, and really went on this own personal development journey. And that kind of slightly overtook my passion then for teaching music specifically. And I thought, how do I now take this that I've learned and I've developed as a human being, how do I then apply this? So well and good knowing all of these things, but it's a bit different teaching Sally, age 8, about personal development is probably not quite the right audience for that. I decided, actually, I'll take the jump. I will step away from teaching in schools and I'll go into a more corporate environment, which was an absolute wild ride, but I've loved every minute of it. So probably just over 10 years ago now, made that decision to move. And I've never looked back, actually. People say, oh, do you miss it? And I quite often get accused of having teacher vibes, especially when I'm on camera and stuff. Oh, well, you're a teacher. Like, oh, is it that obvious? Especially, when you're there doing your workshops and you're talking to people. And it's like, so perhaps you can leave teaching, but teaching never leaves you. Perhaps that's how it is.
How do you think it's helped you or not helped you, or both?
So, little secret is that teaching children is actually very similar to teaching. It's actually very similar to teaching adults. So positive reinforcement, things like that works. If you want to engage in behavior change, you catch them being good. And so I'll tell my leaders and my managers that now. If you've got people in your team that you want to develop and grow, and maybe you want to address some challenges in their behavior, catch them being good. Positive reinforcement. So those things that work in the classroom, those things that work when we're at school and we're younger, those tactics still do work when you're an adult. I think it's a really good setup, essentially. And then you have to tweak as well. You don't want to be condescending and patronizing and things like that, of course. But it's a really good way of setting the foundations, things like classroom management, when you've got 40 very rowdy, very passionate people all together and you have to do your classroom management bit, and you sort of think, now I feel like I'm back at school, actually, as you bring everybody back into the room and then you get into teacher mode. But so some of those skills never leave you and are actually really useful when it comes to adult education and learning and development.
Do you ever find yourself pulling out an instrument in the middle of a workshop just to get everyone back on track?
I should, I should sing to them, really, actually. Yeah, just get the guitar and say, today's workshop, we're all going to sing together. And actually, there's probably some really good background research on making sure how we remember things and hooks and stuff like that. So you remember a melody or whatever, and it makes you think of a certain thing. I imagine the same. I should have to try that. I have to report back to you and say, I did this workshop in song, and this is how it went. Here was my learning retention.
So we were just talking about writing books. I think there's a book in this. So I mean, to think about. I really wanted to go into talking about kind of leadership development. I know this is an area you've done a lot of work around. And before we go into how you develop leaders, it's a pretty hard time to be a leader right now. I get to speak to a lot of CEOs, founders, heads of people in L&D, and the general narrative seems to be it's bloody hard to lead and manage people right now. Do you think that's the case? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, big time. I think our expectations of leaders today are exceptional. So the 360 nature of a leadership role, being there for people, being there for the commercial bit, being everything all at once. And it's not just the everything all at once-ness of things. It's also the rate and quality for which you need to deploy that as well, which is the pretty frightening thing. Making sure you're not the bottleneck and making sure that everything's driving in the right way forward at any one given time. We can get a little bit into one of the reasons why I think that is, and it's to do with skills, right? And it's to do with just the rate of change and how quickly and how much you need to know. How quickly can you acquire these skills in order to stay relevant and keep up to date? I think if you go, I'm not sure this is entirely fair. However, if you've got 10 years worth of experience, I would say to a leader, fine, have you got 10 years worth of experience? Or have you got 1 year's worth of experience that you've repeated 9 times? So how much experience do you have? And I think now you can't afford to repeat that 1 year's worth of experience 9 times. You just can't do it. And I think the gap between the leaders that are making waves and making a change and those that aren't and that have stuck with their current skill stack is becoming more and more evident in the workplace. I don't think you can get away with it anymore, which is why I think it's so important that leaders make sure they keep up to date with the current trends and skills required to be an effective leader.
So do you think there are new skills that you need as a leader today that you didn't need 10 years ago?
I do. Yeah, I think it is the people side of leadership. So especially this changes from industry to industry. So I've been quite lucky as in I've been in sort of public education, I've been in insurance, I've been in retail, and now I'm in the property sector. And they all develop their leaders in slightly different ways. But I'll talk about it from the property industry perspective, is that you can get really good at your thing. So you can be quite technocratic. And that's one of the expectations, is that you are the subject matter expert in something. You know this thing and you can go deep. But again, I don't think that's enough anymore. You have to have that breadth to go along with it, right? So you have to have, if you're not a natural people person, the people skills are no longer optional, right? They have to be integrated. And perhaps you're one of those ones who are really good at getting people together and communicating a vision and a way forward and getting everyone to match your drumbeat. But I think you have to understand the technical world for which people are operating as well. I don't think it's enough anymore to just be a good leader or just be a good manager. I think you need a real 360 blend of all of those things together.
So is that this idea of your manager as a coach, and they don't necessarily need to bring, it's not just a domain expertise as such, but they just got to be able to coach you to arrive at your output or outcome. Yeah. Do you think that model is now not fit for purpose?
I think it can work, and I would be remiss to say otherwise, for the simple fact that I've worked under some and they were absolutely fantastic. And they were like, nope, you're the subject matter expert. And there's another one over there. So if you need any help, ask them, don't come to me. What I'll do is I'll make sure I squeeze every last bit out of you to make sure that you are performing in the way that I know you can perform. And there is space for that. But in a world where regulation changes really quickly. So take the people space. If you think about the things that are going to happen with employee rights, for example, the property industry, things that are going on with leasehold reform and what have you. So those things together add an additional pressure onto leaders, and that they need to know. Being able to bring all of those things together at any one time, I think is really demanding. I think to stay ahead, you need a mixture of all of it.
Given it's so hard to be a leader and a manager, how do you create new ones?
How do you create new managers and leaders? I can tell you what I would look out for with new leaders is I would look out for some proactivity. So I start with seeing who's got something about them that's going to show me that they're growth orientated. And I actually think for anybody who's thinking about becoming a leader that's listening to this, I would say I think this is easier now than ever before. Hopefully to talk with some authority in this for somebody who's been in the public teaching world, is then quite often you are fed things to do, right? So learning can be quite a passive thing. You just have to learn the stuff and recite it and what have you. But when you get to the workplace, that kind of stops. And then that's when you hit learning and development, right? And then suddenly all of the skills that got you through school and university are not necessarily the skills that are going to make you that good at work. Somebody who can say, I recognize that I don't know what's going on here, and I might have been the big fish at uni, I might have got my first, or I might have got my whatever, or I might have done well at college or whatever. But I've come here and suddenly my desk mate is not my age. They're 5 times my age, for example. Do you know? Okay, I do not know what I'm doing now anymore. How do I find out what those skills gaps are? How do I ask for coaching, feedback, mentoring, actively looking around? And I don't think that necessarily comes naturally. But if you do that, then you'll garner the attention of those leaders and those people that are responsible for developing you, such as your learning and development practitioners, for example. We'll hear about you pretty quick if you do that. So once you've got that in place, I'm like, okay, you're asking for feedback, you're being proactive. Now we can talk about what skills that you might need in order to be able to take the next step and become a future leader.
Just coming back to, before we go into a bit more deeper around creating new managers and leaders, just picking up on what you said and applying that to existing current leaders and managers. Because sometimes I see the problem of this lack of growth mindset where we tend to lean on, I've been doing this role for the last 5 years, 6 years, I've been ahead of X, right? I know what I'm doing. And there's almost a reluctance to acknowledge that I need any development. And therefore, you end up in a situation where actually your middle managers and leadership aren't necessarily role modeling that behavior you just said of being curious and learning more and being vulnerable that I don't know how to do X. Do you find that as a challenge for driving that development in your new leaders?
I think that exists everywhere. You get some people that get to the positions they want to be. It's back to I've got my 1 year of experience. I think I'm fine now. I've done what I needed to do. I've put the effort in, and so now I can cruise in whatever position that I'm like manager or leadership position. I think that's why it's really important to be able to have a variety of people around you at any one given time and actively seek those coaches, those mentors, whatever, necessarily outside of your regular scope that are going to be those role models. And I think it's a really good point around learning and development, helping create these role models, because there are people that within the management and leadership space that perhaps just need a little bit of a chivvy up to say, do you know what? You're responsible for these people, reminding people that leadership is a position of service. Right. So it's reminding people that you are responsible for other people and this is part of your role. Can you take on somebody else? Can you take on this person as a bit of almost like an apprentice, if you will, right? Take someone under your wing, do that mentoring piece. And you find that sometimes that relationship together can help 2 people grow. And then that's when the magic really happens, right? So you have someone who really needs that leadership and development, someone with the experience, you pair them together and then they both thrive, right? So I think it can work together quite nicely.
And so let's go back to building our leaders, this next generation of leadership. You spot this potential, they're showing the right early signs of the right skills in training. What do you do? How do we then turn them into a leader?
So I could tell you about skills gap analysis. I could tell you about our pathways that we have that have listed out all of the things you need to do to be a good leader. I could give you 10 book recommendations on that. You just read these, do it, and you will probably be a good leader. I tend to think, however, that why not start with what the organization needs? So why not have a look around you and say, what's missing? How do you find out what's missing? You can ask yourself, what do I want from my leaders that I'm not currently getting? Or you can ask others what they think is missing if you can't identify something, and look to fill that gap. So if you work with some technocrats, so people are really good at what they do, but perhaps lack the ability to present or to galvanize other people, you can find this information out, right? So tactically, what are your employment NPS scores and things like that? What are your employee satisfaction scores, for example? What what gaps can you find? Where do you need to move the dial? And look to fill it. Because with leadership being a complete 360 role now, there's no necessarily one right way of doing it, not necessarily one thing that needs to be done first. So why not look to add value? It has the added benefit because if there's a gap in the business for this, whatever it is, perhaps it's being a great project manager at a leadership level, perhaps it's being the person that can communicate vision and values really well. Because that space is there, that will allow you to thrive so much more. So do you need another technical expert at a director level, or do you need somebody who can really present? So finding out where the gaps are and then looking to fill them. Over time, we move so unbelievably quickly in organizations and in society more widely. Another opportunity will come up and you'll see another gap and then look to fill that, and then we move on. And so always looking for the next opportunity, looking for the next gap, upskilling yourself with the help of your learning and development practitioners around you, or going out courses, whatever it might be, to fill that gap, fill it, get good, and then move on.
I love that. So you're starting with the finish line, right? And I get, where do we need to arrive at? And I guess to define that finish line and that gap, what does that process look like for you? How are you figuring out that this is where we've got a gap in the organization? Who are you talking to for that? Is that quite a structured or an unstructured process?
Curiosity, and this comes back to, are you proactive? Are you going out? Are you asking the right people? Are you making sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people? I think there's no onus on the organization to make sure that when those people are identified, that they are surrounded by those right people. Are they making sure they're having the right coffee catch-ups? Are they invited to the right, we might have external people coming in, for example, to do a work. Are they make sure that they're exposed in the right places to the right people? Then asking the questions, being proactive, looking around you, looking at data points, looking at where is it that the business is currently struggling. And I understand, right? So if you are relatively new and you've not had exposure to leadership before, this is going to take an amount of courage, right? It's going to be scary, I think, because it was for me. So this, perhaps I'm just projecting, but it's scary, right? To go out there and say to your boss's boss, can I please have all of the KPIs for the department? I'd like to know what impact I can make. It's easy for us to say that, and we've probably done it however many times. That's fine. You get a bit numb to it over time. But if you've never done that before, yeah, that can be scary. But there are people around you to help. There are people around you. If you just ask for it, people will help.
Yeah, and once you've understood that, then you're breaking it down to go, okay, to fill this gap.
Correct.
This person needs to have skills X, Y, and Z, right? And then you're trying to figure out, how do I help them get those skills? What's typically in your toolkit when you're thinking about, okay, this is how I can support this person to build those skills? And how are you checking in to make sure you're on the right track or not?
Yeah, so in terms of finding the right skills, how do you check in? How do you make sure that you're moving the dial in the right way? This is an age-old question / challenge for learning and development, which comes down to ROI, right? We're looking at the same thing. If I do a thing, how do I know that then the measure is then better afterwards? And there's a few different ways around this, right? So we've got all the classics like the pre and post surveys, for example. You can ask people before and after. I like the idea of KPIs and business metrics because that's the language that businesses speak, right? So they speak in dashboards. They want to see the graph. So if you can say that we've now implemented this type of skill. So let's go back to the employee satisfaction survey. Let's say that somebody doesn't know, that it comes out really low on understanding the vision from the leadership team. Just to go back to that example, fine. Okay, I'm going to say between now and 6 months' time, I'm going to make it my personal mission to make sure that the company knows about this. And I can say, here's the actions that I took. Then when we remeasure, then has that needle moved? What actions did I take? You can go off your own back as well and ask people for specific examples of when that might be. But it's being able to check in before and after, take action, and then have a look. Did it make a difference? Does anybody, because you might feel better about it, which is fine. But what we're really looking to do is move some needles in the right direction.
Yeah. And are you doing that on a quarterly basis? Or what does that typically look like?
It depends what you're looking to move, right? So I think if employee satisfaction and some larger business organizational goals, then a longer time frame is usually fine. But things like, for example, the number of complaints that come into a business, for example, right? So you can measure that really swiftly. So you can measure it per agent, for example. You can measure it per. So if you were to go out and say, do you know what? I'm on the operational side of the business. We're getting more and more complaints, and over time, I can do a root cause analysis as to why this is. I can locate the individuals that needs to be on this training. I can then deploy the training that I think is relevant that will cover those skills, and then I can measure it afterwards. That can happen really quickly. That whole process can be really quick, and then you can iterate.
Yeah. And I guess, given you've got a lean team, you're a high growth business, there's probably more needs and demands on you than you can meet in any given quarter. How do you leverage to make sure you've got your business as usual, your onboarding, your compliance and pieces, but then you've also got to identify and develop your leaders in a way that's aligned to what the business needs? How are you leveraging technology to be able to make this happen?
So AI has got to be like the big answer to that question, in terms of AI is a fantastic tool because it allows you to be in almost multiple places at once. It is your assistant on the go. So when they're interacting with you, that's fine. But the cost of human to human interaction is relatively high. So if you want coaching, or if you want training, or in person and what have you, that comes at quite a significant cost, comes at a certain moment in time, even with e-learning, for example, right? It comes at a certain point in somebody's life cycle at work, whereas AI is always there. Right? It's always available for you. You can ask it. It's instant. It's your own personal little turbocharge, which means that you can get unhooked really quickly. So it doesn't matter where you are in the organization or what it is you're looking to achieve. It enables you to be able to get on with the big leverage items that you need to get on with, either as a leader or L&D professional. And the more transactional stuff you can train to outsource to artificial intelligence.
How are you using it? What's been the best use cases for you, or the most helpful things you've been able to leverage it for?
Personally, I've been using it whenever my brain just feels like it wants to have a stop during the afternoon or what have you. I will be writing a piece of content or a course or something, and then halfway through a sentence you think, I don't really know how I'm going to finish this sentence. So I'll copy and paste it into AI, and I'll then use it to go, cool. It's a nice sort of nudge. And especially, we were speaking before, I'm a team of one. I am learning and development for the organization at the moment. So having that in order to be able to bounce off to generate ideas is really interesting. So I've been trying to use it more because we have in our team, we have one of our HR coordinators. And she's of a younger generation than I, and I was shocked at the amount of AI usage that she takes part in throughout her day. And I've never felt so old. And but at the same time, I thought, I'm glad I'm able to do these things without the need of it. But am I missing a trick here? Should I be using it even more than I do now to help turbocharge the work that I currently do? And so I've made it a personal mission to go and use it more and more often over the last few months. And then, as you doom scrolling through Instagram, and somebody said, "Oh, have you asked ChatGPT or your chosen tool of AI what it knows about you and what it thinks about you?" And I thought, "Oh, I'm going to give it a go." So if you've not done it, I recommend doing it. It's actually really interesting. And so I asked it to bring this back to leadership and development. I said, what is it that I can do next to help me progress in my career based on the previous chats that we've had? And it was unbelievably specific. And with my coaching mindset on, I was interrogating all of the answers it gave me. I said, is that the right thing really? Do I think that's the right? And in most cases, I thought, yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, this would be the next step. And actually, here's a framework for that, which I could do. And then it asks you some prompts around, would you like me to help build this out? And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. You've just saved me about 6 months worth of work, like just being able to do this. So I would encourage anybody looking to develop. AI is here to stay. It is changing the way that we work. It is going to continue changing the way that we work. It is a phenomenal tool. Use it more, use it often, see what the results are, and then see what it has to say about you and your next steps. And then I think this is when it can get really useful for using it to coach you in certain things and be able to see blind spots that you may have otherwise missed.
Do you find like you're more open to be vulnerable with it? Because we had really interesting, we've got something called How Now Guru. A few people have been using it and we've been getting some really interesting qualitative feedback, overwhelmingly positive. But one of the qualitative feedback that came back is they find themselves more comfortable to being vulnerable around what they're not good at and where they need help, which they may not have felt as comfortable saying that to another human who they work with, or even if it's a manager and they're new in that particular team. And so what you're actually having is more candid, open conversations around the areas you feel like you need to get better at, which might take a lot more time or psychological safety for you to be able to have that with other humans in the organization. Do you find that?
Definitely from a personal perspective, yeah, as you were saying that, you think, yeah, absolutely, I would. Because rightly or wrongly, I think there is a sense in the back of your mind, if you become open and vulnerable to someone, they might think differently of you and things like that. And you're right around that psychological safety piece. But actually, those barriers disappear when you think of it as just a machine on the other end that you can tell it whatever, ask it whatever. And there is that sort of shame, embarrassment, that barrier to access just isn't there, which is really, really interesting. And I think that probably links back to getting existing leaders who tend to be of a slightly older generation than our native AI users that we have currently, getting them to use artificial intelligence more, because it gets you out, maybe because you are the director of whatever, you feel less able to be vulnerable. And so actually, the higher up in the organization you go, perhaps the use cases increase even further. Yeah. For your example right there.
And how do you, we touched on this a bit earlier, but coming to, all right, here's how we're going to generate new leaders and align them to the outcomes we need to see. With existing leaders, when you're identifying areas where they could be better, like there's feedback coming in where there's a gap or something that needs to be addressed, but you've got this problem of almost a lack of self-awareness that I need to develop this. How do you bring in that ability to be self-aware so they are going to engage with what you're offering from an L&D perspective? Because if I don't have the awareness that there's a problem, I'm not really going to engage, and I don't feel like I need to engage with the learning experiences that you're offering.
So I call it an invitation for change. I don't say you need to change this way. I'm not saying tricks of the trade here I'm letting out. So anybody at work who's listening to this will be like, oh, so that's what you did to me. I won't directly challenge somebody who's got a fixed mindset, because I don't think there's any point. But what you can do is invite them to do something differently. How about you go on this experiment with me? How about we do this together? How about you doing it this way? Fine. You think that's fine? Cool, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. What do I know? Do I look like the technical director? No, I don't. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's totally fine. But indulge me. How about we go on this journey together and we try these things and then we just see if it works? That would really help me out, and that'd be really great to go on that journey with you. What do you think? Do you reckon we can do that? So you partner with them. It's not about telling them that they're wrong. It's not about getting them to do anything they wouldn't necessarily want to do. But if you've built up that little bit of trust, it doesn't take much. When somebody's offering you help, it takes a hard asking for your help to say, oh, do you reckon we can try this? It takes a hard person to go, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. Most people go, yeah, okay. And they'll at least humour you for a while. Then you prove that it works, and then you create behavior change. And then it's like, oh, we did that thing. That was really good, wasn't it? So yeah, that solution was really good. Thanks for taking me through that. It was really, I was thinking about this other thing. What do you think? And then you unlock that mindset that actually changes fine.
All right, we could go on. I know we've got to wrap up. What's that one thing for anyone listening right now? What's the one thing they should stop doing, or that one thing they should start doing immediately to have a greater impact in their organization?
One thing they should stop doing or start doing to have a bigger impact. So from a leadership perspective and leadership development, I would say we often talk about the person, we talk about you. And that's natural when we're developing people, right? So we would say, what's your personal brand? How do your values align with the business values? What's your moral compass? What are you a lead from the front? Are you a lead from the back? What kind of personality traits are you? What's your insights profile and all the rest of it? And getting real deep into you and how it is that you work. I would say one of the things that we should stop doing is making leadership about you. I think one of the things that we should start doing is talking about leadership more as a service and something that leaders provide to other people, right? So we should start having the conversations around what is it that your organization needs from you, right? So yes, that's fine. You might have thought out leadership, you might have your own mission statement and what have you. That's fine. But is that what your people need right now? Do you know if that's what your people need right now? And are they aligned? Or do you as a leader need to grow into the position that you now hold? And so that's why I would say stop when we're talking about developing leaders, making it all about them. And I would say start thinking about it in terms of service and what you can provide for others.
Love that. Super interesting. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Thank you very much.
This is how we learn now.
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, So Energy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.